All right. All right. Mic check 1 2 1 2. This is your boy, Mr. Tony Maceo, on our maiden voyage of a new program that I'm starting here at the Pawn the King 4 Network. It's going to be called Ask the Question. It's where we sit down and we have conversations with the most intriguing and engaging people of our time. Today, I have the distinct honor of having with me my OG, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Alex Shaw, director of the movie Grandmaster documentary, Grandmasters of New York. Welcome to the show. It's good to talk to you again, brother. What's been up with you? Right. Okay. So at some point, young Alex gets caught. Young Alex gets caught, and you get sent up on a charge
Possession,
of
right?
conspiracy and possession.
The era with crack, it opened up the first time in history that the federal government started locking up young black men. In the teens and early 20s. That never happened. Prior to that, in order to get a federal case, you had to do something that warranted the feds getting involved in the case, or that warranted the feds determining that it's going to be a federal case. You either bank rob, bank robbery is automatically federal. You had to be a big enough drug dealer. You had to be a terrorist. You had to be a mafia guy. But this regular day-to-day crack dealers going into the feds, these young guys, that was the first time that ever happened. Because which was cost us money, continuation of slavery, all of the political, racist things that they were doing, but they did it in large numbers.
We will see large numbers of poor people, and specifically blacks, going to jail and to prison, and they will not have a chance.
200 narcotic cops stormed through 160th Street in Upper Manhattan tonight.
Make it clear to people that if you're going to sell drugs, you're going to spend a lot of time in jail.
We're going to get these mutts, and hopefully very soon.
Police could have continued to arrest people here throughout the evening, but after a while, they simply ran out of handcuffs.
So I was part of the first group of young black men to get dumped into the federal system. And that's different now, or different then than it is now, because it's been going on for so many decades. The phenomenon is different. But when they did it to us, that meant that this first group of young black men being dumped into the federal system, that we're running into grown men that have been in the federal system, some for 25 years. This is 1989. So in 1989, somebody that's been in for 25 years, you're talking about First Resurrection Muslims, you're talking about Black Panthers, BLA, you're talking about all of the crimes that were going on in the 70s, maybe sometime even in the 60s. Those type of guys that don't even exist anymore, that's who was waiting for us when we got into the federal system. So those are the ones that became our teachers. Those are the ones that became, in some cases, our nemesis, or whatever. But regardless of what they became, that's who we ran into when we went into the federal system. That phenomenon doesn't exist anymore, of young guys running into these type of older men.
Okay. So young Alex gets caught. You get a conspiracy case. Your first day in prison. You go through the process. They're taking your clothes. They're doing the cavity searches. What is the mindset? What is the mentality of a young Alex Shaw entering into the bullpen, or college, as they say, for the first time?
I was one of those people that didn't expect to live to see 21. I would say that. I would say, I don't think I'm going to live to 21. And I was pretty much convinced of that. So in fact, the night that we were arrested, we were raided, and when I think it was 4 different agencies ran up into our where we would stay in. And when I heard the door being batter-rammed open, we had a conflict at the time. And my first thought was that the people that we had conflict with had run up in the house to kill us. So by the time, because it was 3 bangs, on the 3rd bang, the door came open. So I woke up on the 1st. So by the time that 3rd bang and the door opened and you hear them running through the house, by the time they had got into the doorway of where I was, we were sleeping, in fact, I jumped out of the window. I jumped out of the 2nd floor window. And when I fell, they had the automatic weapons with the flashlights on it, so I couldn't see. So all I see is these lights and silhouettes. And I'm just waiting for them to shoot me. And when they don't shoot, now at the same time, remember now, I'm still thinking these are guys we in conflict with. So when they don't shoot, I turn around and start crawling to get away. And when I get to like a fence, I feel hands grab me and a pistol to the back of my head. And I'm waiting for them to shoot me. And it wasn't until I heard one of them say, "Didn't you hear me say freeze?" that it started to click that, oh, these are the police. So I was actually relieved that it was the police. I thought they were coming to kill us all. And I was waiting for them to kill me when I felt the gun in the back of my head. So I'm saying that to say that it wasn't like, my world had come to an end, because the world coming to an end would have been getting killed in the apartment or killed in the street that day. So there was a little bit of relief. I wasn't happy, but as I said, you get to live, fight another day. But that is the second part of that, is what goes through your mind is that I have a philosophy of position or an opinion that, that normal people can't do time, which is a good thing. You're not made to be in a cage. You're not made to live in those circumstances. You're not made not to be around women. And you have to sort of smother a side of yourself in order to just deal with the reality of living that kind of life. You have to numb yourself. And that starts immediately. The first lesson you learn, and some people don't learn it, and you see what happens to them, is you learn how to adjust. And you learn how to adjust by shutting certain parts. At least I did. Maybe that's what I should do, speak for myself. You shut parts of yourself down just so that you can endure it, just so that you can go through it. And we're talking about years now. So once you start shutting these things down, you're not talking about a weekend or a couple of hours or getting your tooth pulled at the dentist. Some people, that's decades of denying yourself your own feelings and your own thoughts and your own longings. You have to adjust yourself and readjust yourself so that you can do this thing. As Albert Camus says in his book, The Stranger, prison is the nakedness of man faced with the absurd, because it's an absurd environment. It's an absurd situation for you to even put a person in. But you're in it regardless. And you have to figure out a way to deal with something. It's like somebody cuts off your arm. You're supposed to have two arms, but guess what? Your arm is gone. You have to figure out how to operate for the rest of your life with just one arm when you're supposed to have two. So when you're doing time, you're supposed to have women and children around you, but you don't. You have to figure that out. You know, you're not supposed to wake up and go to sleep in a cage every night, but you do. You have to figure that out. So, to answer your question, the thought process was almost like a cloud, a fog, a cushioning almost of your senses. You dull yourself so that you're only thinking about going forward. Really, you know, everything is about going forward. Getting through it. And that's why there were certain people, if anybody that I ever ran across that had 20 years or more, I put them in my mind in a different category because I knew how I was getting through it. It hurt for them to give you, to know that you were given 10 years. But regardless of how much it hurt, you could still see it. I was 18. So I could see knocking out this time and going home. As long as I survived. But the people that had 20 years and 30 years in life, I don't know what they told themselves. And since I didn't know what they told themselves, I always looked at them different. Because I didn't know what that was. How do you wake up every day? How do you get through this? How have you been coping with this for the last 15 years or 20 years, knowing that they're telling you you're never going home? I didn't know what that was. I know what I had to do to deal with what I was given.
And at some point, that transition, how do you make that transition? And how do you begin to, make friends? Make comrades? How do you begin to build relationships? Right now, you in the belly of the beast. How does Alex Shaw cope day by day?
So I'm saying I never sought out a circle. I had a circle, but I didn't seek out. I never sought to join. My interest at the time was being a 5%er because I was introduced to that when I was like maybe 12 years old. That I had gotten sidetracked. That's really, when people ask you, when you were little, what did you want to be? I wanted to be a 5%er. And those are the only people I ever looked up to when I was younger.
On the mic, I will rise right in front of your eyes, cause I am a surprise. So I'ma let my knowledge be born to a perfection. All praise is due to Allah, and that's a blessing.
And I was introduced to it for a minute. Like I said, I lived in a West Indian neighborhood, so it's not like the stories you hear about Fort Greene and the Bronx, where you had all these 5%ers testing you. I didn't have that. I was something me even then. That wasn't around me. It's something I wanted to do. kind of got me off of that, but it's something I always wanted to re-immerse myself in. So when I went into prison, that was the only highlight of going to prison. That was the only positive thing that I could think of about being in prison, was at least I get to pick back up the lessons and learn about the 5%, be a 5%er. So I did that in a very sincere and in a very intense way, that at a certain point, this goes back to what you said about being from New York, the younger people that were also doing time, I became the one that they would come to when they wanted to learn about the 5%ers. But because of me not having the average attitude of the average New Yorker, it wasn't just New York brothers that were coming to me. You had brothers coming to me from Cleveland, Ohio, and New York, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So the crew that I ended up forming, and to be honest with you, the crew that ended up forming around me were brothers that were interested in being 5%, but they were from all over the country. So without even looking for a group to run with, I had a group to run with. And they made sure I was all right.
I mean, when you win day by day, what's a typical day, or what was your typical day in the penitentiary? What was, you woke up and did what?
Read and studied. I went through several. I mean, I was maybe in 3 years before I even started working out. See, I didn't know a lot when I went in, but I knew enough to know that you 18 years old, these people gave you 10 years. You can't come out 18 years old or thinking like you're 18 years old. So my job was to make sure that when I came out, my development wasn't arrested. You know, socially you can't do a lot about it, but you can keep up, you can learn. So at first it was reading and studying and being around people I could learn from. The 5%ers not having a real structure, I was still able to get into things, get into little fights, and I had a thing where I used to make knives, and I was still smoking weed and drinking jailhouse wine. So I did that for like my first 4 years maybe. But I was learning, I was studying, I guess I was considered like a leader in the particular, at least among the young people. Because even you mentioned Supreme McGriff, he was a 5%er as well as some of the older guys, but they didn't follow behind me, but they respected what I was doing. And Yaqui Allah, his brother Merciful, these were older guys. These Yaqui and Merciful, they were on Nicky Barnes' case. So these were guys that would help me with information and support and all of that. But we were young, so that was like all we were doing. We had the 5% flags on everything, and we were like they were when they were probably younger.
So, how long do you stay, or how long do you remain in the 5% of faith when you are incarcerated? How does that sustain you? Do you develop some type of code of personal discipline? Do you get around other OGs that are 5%ers? Do you talk to and have relationships with other NOI members while you're in prison? What happened?
Well, my thing was a little different because I didn't know about the Nation of Islam. Because see, in 1975 when the Nation of Islam fell, the only ones that you really had in New York that were really teaching what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught were the 5%ers. And I guess the area that I lived in not being, I mean, because maybe being West End, I don't know. I never remember seeing brothers in the Nation of Islam. I mean, 5%ers. But when you went now, when I went into the feds, you had FOI, members of the Nation of Islam, in prison. That it's like some of them had been in for 20, 25 years, meaning that they may have been locked up in the 70s. This is before the fall. Some of them, they didn't even know anything about Minister Farrakhan's leadership or anything like that. You had certain places that there was a level of corruption that came in. It wasn't nationwide, but places like Newark and
Yep. Philly.
The press will coin them the mafia or the black mafia, a term which they never themselves claimed.
But they were Muslim.
The FOI from Philadelphia, they gave them that title, the Philadelphia Black Mafia, FOI.
These were certain types of Muslims. So a lot of these were like bank robbers, and in Newark, New Jersey, a group of them ended up breaking away and calling themselves the New World Nation of Islam.
In the mid-1960s, some members of the Nation of Islam would have a difference in view and made a decision to split. They would go on in a different direction under the name New World of Islam.
And I'm saying that some of these guys from Newark and Philadelphia, those were the ones that were teaching us. The ones that were out doing the right things, 9 times out of 10, they weren't in prison. But the ones who had, a little bit of the crime mixed into with their Islam are the ones that ended up in
prison.
A group of gangsters that were involved in some serious crimes. They would end up being sentenced to over 2,000 years in prison for the crimes committed.
Got you. Okay, well, let me ask you this. At this time when you were incarcerated, at what point do you make that turn? At what point, how does it happen? You discover martial arts, you discover what's the pivotal moment for you when you say, okay, I'm going to be a different person? At what point do you start training? Do you start studying? Or does that happen after you get out? Okay. Show us, the point where you began to evolve, where this, this different individual or this new man is coming forward.
I used to like to smoke weed, and one particular night I had smoked some weed. But what I also like to do is I used to like to smoke weed and then read, because I'm a reader. To this day, I love to read. So I would be with a couple of guys, we'd smoke, but at a certain point, I would excuse myself because I wanted to read while I was still high. And I was reading one of the books of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and his teacher, Master Fard Muhammad, is referred to as Allah in person. But at the time, I really wasn't spiritual, or I wasn't interested in that. So I would read his books, and every time he would say Allah appeared in the person, Master Fard Muhammad, to whom praises due fail, I would just kind of skip over it, just read it. And that night when I had been high and I read that, it's like my brain just stopped on a dime on that phrase. And it just started going over in my mind. And my mind went to, in school, when we're taught that when you're dealing with fractions, you break them down to the lowest common denominator. And this is I remember my train of thought was that there's always one. Like right now, I don't know how many people are on this line, but there's one person on this line right now that has more knowledge, wisdom, and power than anybody else on this line. That person would be the God of this line. I'm in North Carolina right now. There's one person in North Carolina, whether we know who it is or not, that has more knowledge, wisdom, and power than anybody else in North Carolina. That person would be the God of North Carolina. And you just keep going on and on and on till you get to the planet. There's always going to be one person. They make movies about that. The one. There can be but one, Highlander and all of that.
There can be only one.
because that's just simple mathematics. There's nothing equal in the universe. That's why you have Olympics and you have elections and you look for a wife and you just don't grab a woman off the street, because nobody is equal. We're created equally, meaning under the same laws, our bodies work the same, we're subjected to the same laws of gravity and what have you. But when it comes to individuals, nobody is equal. There's always going to be somebody greater than somebody else, up until the point where you get to one person. And so all of this is going through my mind, and I understood it. I don't even know if you say I believed it. I understood, okay, I see what he's saying. Because remember, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad only went to the 4th grade of school. And he taught Malcolm X. And he taught Mr. Farley. He taught Muhammad Ali. He taught Clarence Sturgeon. 5%ers come from him. And not only did he teach them, he taught about food. So how does a person that in 1934 start teaching about eating one meal a day and eating certain kinds of food? And just recently you're hearing about intermittent fasting.
Wait, let me, I gotta stop you there. I gotta stop you there. I'm on my own little journey now. You know, I told you and I have discussed this. I've gotten into martial arts. And so now I'm doing, you know, Tai Chi, Qigong. I'm also doing some Kali and some Salat, right? It's all jumbled together. That there's a science to you, I promise. But I'm also, you know, getting myself back into shape. And so I was at the health food store recently, and I was telling this lady, I said, okay, one thing I'm working on, I said, I'm trying to, you know, drop weight. I'm trying to not become diabetic. And I said, you know, one of the things I'm trying to do is, you know, shape up. And then she said these words. She said, what will help you shape up faster? She said, eat one meal a day.
Right.
And instantly, I thought of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, instantly, because when he said that 70 years ago, people said he was crazy. People said, this man doesn't know what he's talking about. You need 3 meals, you need the energy. And today they're saying exactly the opposite.
Eating only 1 meal a day is exactly what it sounds like. I'm going to share with you the surprising benefits that it's offered me, and also what the science has to say about what it can do for your health.
Right. And they're saying exactly, you know, what he's saying as far as dietary laws are concerned.
Right.
And so, you know, I found that interesting. And so, okay, this man had to be gifted. In spite of whatever you think his faults were, in spite of whatever his mistakes, the mistakes he made, whatever you think about this man had to be gifted. You got to give the man his due. When you say at this point, when you're in jail and you become acquainted with these teachings, does Alex Shaw become, is it an automatic pivot? At what point do you start getting into the science of martial arts? What does that process look like for you in prison? How do you become the warrior the scholar, the documentarian that we know today? What's that cocoon process? You get into the nation, you get into the teachings. How is this new man formed?
That was my point, was that yes, he was gifted, but he was gifted in another sense, meaning he was gifted with information from somebody. Like, you give me a gift, I'm gifted because you gave me a gift. His teacher that taught him for 3 years and 4 months gave him information that the world didn't have, like how to eat to live. In 1942, and I could go on, but I'm gonna give one instance. In 1942, when the average person didn't know who Honorable Elijah Muhammad was, the Roosevelt, who was president at the time, had him arrested. There's a famous picture online with him
Yep.
next to
I saw that.
an agent in Washington, D.C. And he was arrested, and he was taken into custody where he was questioned. And one of the things he was questioned about and that he began to talk to them about is the origin of the moon. Now, remember, this man went to the 4th grade, and he's telling the government officials that the moon wasn't always where it presently is. That the moon was at one point part of the earth, and that there was an explosion, and during the explosion, the water that was on the moon fell down onto the earth, which is why the moon still has an effect with the tides and with the menstruation of women on the waters of the earth, and that's why you have so much water on the earth. 75% of the earth is water. And he started explaining, and it made him telling them that is different than him telling you and I that, because we don't have the resources to really check. But when you're telling the government these things, and it makes sense to them, they say, well, let's start a program where we can go to the moon.
Forward. It has a stark beauty all its own. It's like much of the high desert of the United States. It's different, but it's very pretty out here.
And when they went to the moon, they found what? Craters. Where what? If you Lake Michigan or one of these lakes, if you dump the water out of there, you would have a crater. And they said that the only difference between the composition of the moon and the earth is that it was devoid of water. So everything that he said, they ran into it when they went to the moon.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
So now back to me, I'm saying that when I went through that thought process of what he meant when he said that this man has more knowledge, wisdom, and power than anybody else, I went to what he taught him. And my thought process was then, because I never wanted to join the Nation of Islam, but I told you I used to like to read. And one of the books I read, it said a soldier is that unique individual who actually lives what he believes. I remember that day I thought of that saying, and I said, well, I done messed around and stumbled into belief now. I believe this. And if I believe him to be who we are taught that he is, he set up a structure that I don't have. And regardless of whether I want to submit to the structure, I'm going to do it because the best knower set it up. So I wrestled all night with joining the Nation of Islam because it wasn't like a lot of people. I didn't want to, but I did because I read so much that I actually believed it. This leads you to the martial arts, is that there was a brother in the prison. Remember I told you a lot of us were younger, and during those days, you have all of these young brothers dropped into this federal system with these grown men that you don't have anything in common with. Not only are they grown men, they're grown men that have been in prison for the last 25 years. You're fresh off the street, so you have a tendency to surround yourself with the other young people. That's the circle you move in. And at the time I was in Pennsylvania, because the feds move you around. And one of the guys who was my age was a brother named Wali, who was young. He was also from Brooklyn. He was part of a group that no longer exists called the Ansar community, or the Ansarullah community. Some people are familiar with Dr. York. But before he was calling himself Dr. York, he was Imam Isa. And they had a big community in New York where they would wear all white. They would sell incense, and they would sell books, and they would sell oils. And
you got your shampoo here, Survive. This book is 15. Okay. You got your posters, which is 10. All right. No rapping to the girls.
Oh, no, don't worry about that. You know.
All right, and remember, be humble. All right. Assalamu alaikum.
And they were present. So when I said I didn't really see FOI, those were the brothers that I would see. And somebody had told me at one point that they were all martial artists, they were all killers. And, you know, so whenever I saw them, not only did I see them, I saw them as trained men. So my friend Wali was a part of that. And at one point we were talking, and he said that he had met a brother in the same prison they were in that had started teaching him martial arts. And I was instantly captivated and fascinated by that. And I didn't express how fascinated I was, and that I was in fact a little jealous because, you know, I was like, look at his luck. He got this guy teaching him how to fight here. And one day he came up and he told me that the guy wanted to meet me. And I always tell people that when he said he wanted to meet me, it wasn't necessarily me. He wanted to meet somebody like me. And this goes back into the Islam because the brother had a rule. He only taught Muslims. So at this time I had already joined the Nation of Islam. And he didn't call himself a Muslim brother that was teaching the martial arts, but he only taught Muslims because he would teach what I would say backwards, meaning that in prison you're not supposed to teach, study, read, practice anything martial arts related. So he knew that.
Why is that, Alex? Why do you think it is?
Because they don't want you to have anything that would give you an advantage over them, because they can't have guns either. So you got all of these guards that are already outnumbered, walking around amongst all of these guys that's lifting weights and hitting the heavy bag all day, and come from the streets and have violent tendencies, and then you want to put some martial arts on top of that. that's like, I mean, you put yourself into the shoes of a correctional officer or a warden. That's a recipe for disaster. So they don't even want you reading martial arts books. I have write-ups now from back then when because they knew we were training, and they would try to catch us. And when they would see us doing anything martial arts related, they would write us up. So this brother's name was Kenyatta. And like I said, he taught backwards. So because of the somewhat illegality of martial arts in the prisons, and because of the circumstances of prison, you get transferred, you go to the holes, so many things can happen. He had a way of teaching where once he met you and he liked you and he felt you could be trusted with it, all he taught was killing and maiming. I remember one of the first things he told me is, he said, the knees and the eyes. I said, what do you mean knees and the eyes? He said, when you're about to confront somebody or somebody standing in front of you, the closest things to you are his knees and his eyes. And he said, and if you master going at the knees and going at the eyes, he said the average person will have a hard time dealing with you.
There is I want to get your opinion on this clip. I want to show a clip here. Sure. And this individual that you're talking about, apparently prisons are filled with these kinds of, I wouldn't say filled, I'll say this. There are guys like the gentleman that the brother that you're describing in these penitentiaries.
Yes.
And I think in some instances, you know, when I hear the stories, that these brothers actually save a lot of lives of people that are in the penitentiary system. So the interview that I want you to check out right now is an interview by a man by the name of Quentin Brown. Fair use, by the way, fair use. A man by the name of Quentin Brown, who is a businessman and an entrepreneur who he himself had done time. He came out and, you know, now he's successful. And he talks about this same type of relationship. He talks about this same type of education as it would be. And I want you to look at this, and I want to get your thoughts on it. And then we're going to go back to you and let you finish your story, because you also put another clip up here. We want to talk again today about Dr. Moses Powell and some other people. But I just want to get your opinion and your assessment of what you're about to hear. Okay, so stand by just one moment, and I'm gonna pull it up here.
For a couple years, and that was my wake up call. And there's a story behind that stint. When I was in the feds, my first bunkie was a guy by the name of Mujahid, and he was like, youngster, you should come my cell. I said, all right, no problem. Went in his cell. First day, he having a little stature on me, a little size on me. I said, listen, brother, you gotta get on the top bunk. So he was like, listen, young brother, I can't get on the top bunk. He's saying, I'm an older guy, man. You should take the top bunk because you're younger. You can get up and down easier.
Right.
So me thinking I'm this masculine, super macho man, I'm like, yo, I'm not getting on nobody's top bunk. So we talked back and forth for about 20 minutes. By the 21st minute, he convinced me to take the top bunk. That night, I stayed in the cell with him and we just talked all night. Like I'm talking about all night. I've never really built with an older gentleman, me coming from not having a father. I never really talked to an older gentleman the way I talked to him that way. Most of the guys where I was from that were older, they was competing to be my age. They weren't acting mature.
Right.
So I never really met a man that mature. And I never would expect to have met that person in that situation.
Wow.
So now you fast forward, the next morning he was like, yo, come with me to breakfast. I walked with him to breakfast. Sitting in the mess hall in prison, I'm like, a lot of people keep looking at us, man, but I'm not noticing anything. I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, is he gay? Like,
Right.
That's what I'm thinking.
You start
Yeah,
thinking
like, what's
different,
up with son? So long story short, after breakfast, he was like, yo, what are you about to do? I said, I want to go back to, I'm about to go back to the cell. He was like, nah, come with me to the yard. I go with him to the yard. As soon as we go to the yard, he clapped his hands. He goes like this, about 30 Muslims lined up. And he said, I'm Mujahid. He said, if I would have got on that top bunk, I would have killed you this morning.
Wow.
He was the imam, meaning the high priest of the whole prison.
Wow.
About 300, maybe 350 Muslims. And I never knew, never had a clue, never guessed it, never thought anything. But his humility showed me my arrogance almost got me killed.
Would it be correct to say that inside of American penal institutions, there are men like this young man, like this brother he is talking about? How instrumental are those people in saving lives? Was a man like this instrumental in your voyage, in you becoming who you were?
I met somebody very similar to that. His name was or is Adam Abdullah. And he was part of a group called the Hanafi Muslims. And the Hanafi Muslims had an episode in the 70s where their leader was one of the few that had tried to go against the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in the 70s. And
I remember that.
He would write articles, and he was affiliated, or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was affiliated with them.
Right.
And he had purchased a home, a mansion in Washington, D.C. for some of the followers to live in. And there was an instance where some brothers who were supposedly affiliated with the Nation of Islam. Remember I told you about the Philly book thing? You had a lot of renegades that would come up in certain cities. You had a group of brothers that was from Philly, but they went into the home and they killed almost everybody in the home, men, women, children. Not long after that, a group of the Hanafi Muslims, Adam Abdullah being one of them, they took a building hostage over in Washington, D.C., and they had hostages. And during that takeover, D.C. Mayor Marion Barry was shot. He wasn't the mayor yet, but he was shot during that episode. And there was also a movie that you can watch on YouTube that's called Muhammad, Messenger of God.
These letters from Muhammad, Messenger of God, To the rulers of the world, call the world to Islam.
With Anthony Quinn.
Muhammad is a liar. Liar? Where's the lie and where's the truth?
And they wanted that movie to not be shown. Now, fast forward, Adam Abdullah, he had been in from that case for about maybe 13 years at the time. This was in 1990 probably. And he is the one that taught me how to pray, how to make salat, and how to make salat in Arabic. I would go to his cell and he would teach me. At one point, he and I went to the chapel and we watched the movie, just him and I. We watched the movie Muhammad, Messenger of God, that had something to do with him being in prison. That was one of their demands. And at a certain point, he started crying. And he looked at me and he said, you know, I was young. I didn't know no better. Like, you know, I'm locked up for this. And now I'm sitting here watching it with you. So yeah, that story that the brother said reminded me of that. And yeah, you do have a lot of Muslim brothers like that in prison because, see, in order to really do time, you have to have something bigger than doing time. I heard Mr. Farrakhan say something because everybody knows about that phenomenon of brothers going to prison and becoming Muslim. And people all often equate that with protection. And a lot of times I've seen that, it happens. But also what it is that to be involved in crime, you have to think a certain way. Criminals are very concrete-minded, practical, nuts and bolts type people.
Thinking of a master plan, cause ain't nothing but sweat inside my hands. So I dig into my pocket, all my money spent. So I get deeper, but still coming up with lint. So I start my mission, leave my residence, thinking how could I get some dead presidents. I need money. I used to be a stick-up kid, so I think of all the devious things I did.
Because you can't be super mysterious and spiritual and rabbit's foot, good luck and all of that and be a criminal. You have to really look at the circumstances.
I used to roll up, this is a hole up. Ain't nothing funny, stop smiling. We still don't nothing move but the money. But now I learn to earn cause I'm righteous.
So when these people get arrested and they go to prison and they start looking for something more, they don't want to give up the practicality. They don't want to start thinking mystical and things that don't make sense just because they want something more in their life, a God or something. So a lot of men, black men especially, accept Islam because it makes sense. So I can be a better person. I don't have to give up my masculine. I don't have to give up anything. But most of all, I don't have to give up my good sense. You're not asking me to believe something that, you know, when I die, I have to see whether or not you lied to me or not. You know, what you're telling me right now adds up. And I can see it. I can put my hand on it. And now I don't have to violate the person that I am. Because when you do a crime, it doesn't necessarily mean you're a criminal, but it does say something about the type of person that you are. Because there's a difference between being a criminal and being an outlaw. And a lot, like I like to say in the 70s when you had the graffiti writers, that's what that was. Those were outlaws, but they were committing crimes by defacing public property. Because their rule was back in the 70s was that they wouldn't, not like now, they wouldn't write on private property. They would only write on public property. And it doesn't, and if you were a graffiti writer, I don't care how talented you were, how gifted you were as an artist, if you wasn't taking a chance and putting it on one of those public facades or the train, you weren't recognized as a writer.
What you do last night? We did 2 whole cars. It was me, Dez, and Mean 3, right? And on the first car, in small letters, it said, "All you see is," and then, big, black silver letters, it said, "Crime in the city," right?
Being a graffiti writer is taking the chances and shit, taking the risks, taking like all the arguments from the transit, from the police, from your own mom, from your friends and shit.
Even now in New York, if you go into a hardware store, the spray paint cans are behind a locked gate or an enclosement. That's from the graffiti writers, because part of their rule was in order to be a graffiti writer, one thing that you never do is you never buy paint. When you put something up, it must be with paint that you stole. That was part of the outlaw culture.
How can you call people to hang out windows and watch trains riders, man? You gotta write, you gotta do the action, man. You gotta go out there and rack up. You gotta go out and paint and be called an outlaw at the same time.
So I'm saying that when you're black in America and there's something in you that says, man, just something about what they're teaching me in school is not right, and you begin to reject it, and you say, I'm not going into their army, so you reject that. And you know what, I don't want to work for these people either, and you reject that. There's nothing left. I don't want to go to church, and you reject that. There's nothing left for you in this type of world except the street. That's why you meet such good people in the street. You meet such good people in the prison. You meet some terrible people too. But I'm saying in the midst of that, you meet such people of high character in the streets and in prison, because some of it is not because they were bent or crooked. It's just that they rejected everything else. And in this world, once you reject everything that they're offering you, there's nothing set up for you except the street. So a lot of brothers that come in and they accept Islam or they accept whatever, it's because they're not bad people. I wasn't a bad person. I just didn't know what else to do, but I know what I didn't want to do. So a lot of times, those are some of our best people, because they have enough fight and they have enough of us in them. The spirit, as people say, of our ancestors, what have you, that they don't even know why, but they reject it all. I'm not doing that, or that, because they don't see us. There's an old adage that if we took a group picture and I were to show you the group picture, you would base whether or not you like that picture on how well you look. And if everything else could be perfect, but if your face is blurred or if your face is covered up, then I don't like that picture. Everybody else looks good, but you don't, so you don't like the picture. But that's how it is with education. That's how it is with religion. We're supposed to reject it if we don't see ourselves in it. So they're teaching us a certain thing, but we're not in it. But we accept, some of us accept it, some of us don't. And the ones that don't, a lot of times they're spiritually and mentally healthier by rejecting it. Because why should you accept it when you're not in it? Why should I accept a religion and I'm not in it? Why should I reject a job that goes into feeding you and your people and not mine?
That brings me back here. I like having these conversations with you, Alex, because you jog up, different concepts and ideas that I think about often. And my question is this: people see, and we're gonna get back to your martial arts journey in a minute, but people see, like the way you saw this duality where I didn't want that.
Right.
Do you think that? Well, let me say it this way. Let me ask the question this way. How much of a role do you believe that an environment or community plays in your perception? Because you said, well, I didn't want to do this, or I didn't see myself in here. I didn't see myself in this era. One of the biggest, or this area, one of the biggest things that people have a problem with, and I always tell people, I come from the church. I come from the Christian church. And I don't think that's anything to be ashamed of. But I think the way that it's presented, we weren't told that most of the stuff that you see in the Bible, and I'm not going to get into the Hebrew Israelite thing. I just don't have the patience for that. But my point is this, is that from the research I've had and from what the church that I grew up in, there was a certain degree of race consciousness and pride in the black church that's not discussed. Everything is not jackleg preachers sleeping with choir directors. Everything is not jackleg preachers getting over and spending people's rent money and rolling around in goddamn Cadillacs.
Now, the subject of today's sermon is giving. Because remember, y'all, Jesus was a giver.
Amen.
Preach
Better
that.
say it,
Preach it.
Sam.
And the good book tells us if you want to live like Jesus, we have to give like Jesus. So let's start filling up those baskets, y'all. Right.
And slick SUVs.
All right, because the church is in need, brothers and sisters, in need of a new roof, in need of a new robes for the choir, in need of an outdoor pizza oven.
Wait, what's that?
A lot of these churches firsthand help build a community. A lot of these churches help build HBCUs, like the one I graduated from. So when you make that assessment and you say, well, I didn't want to do this, my question is, how much of that has to do with the people that are in that situation? When I was coming up, in my church, we learned about Marcus Garvey. In my church, when we were coming up, we learned about Denmark Vesey, Gabriel Prosser, and Nat Turner. It wasn't this type of effeminate Christianity that people picture. When the first time I heard the name Louis Farrakhan was a Baptist minister was expressing support for said person. Where in many churches throughout this country, many black churches, and this is why I feel that Christianity gets a bad rap. They act like there's no church of no shrine of the Black Madonna, as though Albert Cleage didn't exist. They act like there was no Deacons for Defense that came out of the Christian experience. They act as though there was no militancy whatsoever in the church because they looking at T.D. Jakes or Creflo Dollar. So when a young Alex Shaw steps out there and you said, I don't want to do this and I had just the opposite. It wasn't that I wanted to be a minister or a pastor, but there was a degree of, I did see myself in there. I did see that most of the events that happened in that Bible, most of that stuff didn't happen in Europe. Alex, come on now. Most of that stuff didn't happen there. So I knew from an early age that these people were lying. So my question to you is, what amount of this stuff has to do with environment and the way it's taught, as opposed to it being a doctrine that people universally reject?
Okay. I'm glad that you said that, because it allows me to incorporate that element that you're speaking of in what I was saying about brothers in the street and brothers in the prison, and you having some of our best people there because they have the strength to resist these things. That's what you're saying about the people you're around in the church. See, they're like the same, they come from the same place, because the way Christianity was given to us by our enemies was not designed to produce what you said. So the people that you're speaking about that were able to infuse in the Deacons of Defense and what have you, that's a result of their character and their strength, where they inserted something into it that wasn't put. And I know, of course, they said Shrine of the Black Madonna and all, but I'm saying in America, the way that it was packaged up, the same thing happens with Islam, because once the Arabs, a lot of the white people that got into Islam, they've repackaged that where they've taken us out of it.
Whom God chose. And in that we believe.
So what I'm saying is the Christianity that exists, that was introduced to us, those elements that you're speaking about, not only were they not there, they were consciously not there. So those instances that you are speaking of is It's the same thing I'm talking about, whereas the same thing that made the brothers go out into the street as a form of resistance against all of those things, to be in the church after the way that it was formulated and put together and come up with what they call a Black liberation theology. That comes from out of us. That's in spite of them. That's in spite of what they tried to do with the religion. You know, so I get that, and I've known people like you're talking about. As you know, Archbishop Russell Davenport, him being a martial artist and an archbishop, these white people didn't envision that when they gave us Christianity. And let me say this, with that project that I did, the Grand Masters of New York, there were times when all of my circle was martial artists. Meeting with, interviewing, training, learning from, befriending, studying these people and studying martial arts and boxing and things. After all of that was said and done, and it's still going on, but after all of that was said and done, the number one lesson that I learned, that I tell people whenever I get the chance, is that we have the fight wrong. When we talk about fighters, we thinking about people who can knock other people down or throw other people around. But really, when is the last time any of us even had a fight? How many people do you know that are losing their life because they got beat up? How many people you know are dying of getting beat up? Ass whoopings. It's good to know how to fight, but the main fight is we're all getting older. As you get older, you get heavier. Do you have enough fight in you to fight off them extra pounds? Do you find yourself getting stiffer? Do you have enough fight in you to fight off the stiffness? You find technology changing and growing. Do you have enough fight in you to keep up with it so you don't get left behind? So what you're talking about, these people in the church, those are our fighters, because in the midst of something that was not designed for us, they found ourselves in it, and they teach it, and they found strength in it, but it wasn't given to us to give us strength. So that's the commonality that I've found in my travels, is that those are the people that I look for. That's why I readily agree with you, because I have developed an eye for that. People that have enough fight in them to overcome the gravity of this world's life, because there's a certain gravitational pull that white people have created that pulls us down. You can see it in our faces. You can see it in our posture and our countenance. You can see it in our conversation. That if you don't have enough fight in you to resist the weight that they put on us, that weight will crush you. It'll crush you spiritually, it'll crush you morally, it'll crush you physically, it'll crush your ambitions. You can be making $300,000 a year and be crushed, because you're doing it within the confines of what they give you. And those are your rewards. So I respect, and I, like I said, have an eye for those who have enough fight to come up with survival modes and methods and means in spite of the world that we live in, because that's not there for us. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that one of the things that Caucasians vowed they would never teach us coming out of slavery was the science of warfare, and the science of business and the science of birth control, but the science of warfare. So where we have come in terms of fighting, whether it's fighting for rights or fighting for liberation or fighting physically or militancy and all of that, that is indicative of our spirit, because we're in a world that they vowed never to introduce us to that, to never teach us that, for us to not be, for me and you to even have this conversation. We're not supposed to be having this conversation. We're supposed to be talking about what they told us in school what they saying on the news, or the cartoons we grew up watching, the world that they set up, we're supposed to reflect that. And that's what I meant by the outlaws. Those that reject that are considered the criminals and the outlaw. And you could be the best person that there is, but you become an enemy to that and to them because you're going contrary to what they set up for us.
Okay, indeed. Well, let me ask you this question now. So as you start to get into, you were talking about this individual, and you were saying that he told you the needs of the eyes. This is an individual that is beginning to teach you martial arts. Yes. Talk a little bit about him. What was your relationship with him? And is he still around? Have you talked to this individual? Is he still on this side of glory, as they say in the church? Is he still with us, or has he transitioned, or what?
Well, yeah, his name was Kenyatta. He was from Detroit. And he was because remember now, when you're talking about prison, everybody's there for something. So he was a ninjutsu practitioner. And he was teaching, even on the street, young brothers ninja tactics. And they were using that to break into jewelry stores. That was his case. His background, martial arts wise, was in Vietnam. Now, I have to tell you, Tony, I'm always reluctant to tell this story because it sounds so fantastic that, you would think I was making it up. But all I can tell you, this is what he told me. That when he was in Vietnam, he was part of a group called the Shadow Force. And they got all of the dirty work and the dangerous assignments that they didn't want to give to the Green Berets, who were white guys. Shadow Force was all black guys. There was a Chinese national that was involved with helping them in hand-to-hand combat, who, because of his service to the United States government, he was given citizenship, and he told them that he would be in San Francisco. And if any of them wanted to check him out, look him up, that's where he would be. Kenyatta's the only one that did it. And when he got to the area where him and the other martial artists were, they were all, not all of them, but a lot of them were practitioners of the various animal styles of Kung Fu. And since Kenyatta, being a black man with a Japanese art of ninjutsu, he ran into Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee was an individual they tried to put into the footsteps or the shoes of Bruce Lee after Bruce Lee died in '73. There are a few Bruce Lee movies out there. So Bruce Lee had been studying Jeet Kune Do, and they began to swap, wisdom techniques and what have you. And Kenyatta, being a gifted martial artist, he would learn aspects of those animal styles while he was in that area. So by the time I ran into it, when I said that he wanted to meet me, what I mean is that he understood that a lot of those animal styles are based off of your body type and your temperament. So he would, once he taught that first student, Wali, if he had a particular art or aspect of the art he wanted to teach, he would ask for, he would tell him the body type that he wanted. So he said, "Would you find me a Muslim brother?" And at the time I was very slim, and which is where I get the name Thin Man from. So that must have been what he said. It says Wali was a friend of mine, and he knew I wanted to be, he brought me in. And that's what he began to teach, those different forms. But he didn't teach them as you would teach them in China, or as you would teach them in a dojo setting. He taught them to us based off him being a brother from Detroit, teaching brothers in prison. So it was very forthright, and that's what led me to Moses Powell, because when I was released from prison, I thought that I was just so fortunate to run across somebody that was able to teach in that way, that I would never have that opportunity again. And I thought that everything out here was dojos and belts and gis, and I didn't want that. So it wasn't until I was introduced to one of the students of Moses Powell in the mosque, in fact. And when I saw Sanukis for the first time, face to face, not only did it remind me of what we were doing in prison, it was better than what we were doing in prison. And that's what led me to studying what Moses Powell taught.
How did you come to meet many of these people? Because you see these people in here. You see, of course, two of them in here are your teachers, Latif Sadiq, and of course there's Pi May himself, Yehuda Shem, Yehuda, and the other brothers in here. How did you get the opportunity? What are the circumstances that led to you meeting these people?
And my good friend Johnny in Georgia, from South Carolina but living in Georgia, and he and I had determined to, just do more. As coming up FOI, we, you come out and you disappoint yourself by your level of involvement and activity. And, we were kind of like lamenting that, and we determined that we wanted to do more. And a brother once asked me if I could do a project on the Nation of Islam. And when I told Johnny about it, now he doesn't get excited easily, but he got excited about that. And he sent me a camera. At the time, I didn't even have a camera. You asked about, what precipitated me meeting all of these men, because I interviewed about 40 martial artists when I got back to New York, not just martial artists, masters and grandmasters. And one of the things that opened up the door was Victor Moore and Steve Muhammad. See, that was like my okay card, because a lot of these brothers were in their 60s and 70s, and they had grown up watching them. They were fans of Victor Moore and Steve Muhammad, and as a result, even though they didn't know me, but I just came from interviewing them. They wanted to be interviewed by the guy that interviewed them. So that gave me the opening. And then there's certain names in New York that are more well known than others. So once I was able to get to Soke Hassan Khalik and certain people, now other people wanted to be interviewed by the guy that interviewed Soke Hassan. So then the word kind of spread of what I was doing, and people just wanted to be involved. And my take on martial arts is different because of Kenyatta in the prison, and because we were talking about being outsiders and outlaws. He raised me up in martial arts to be an outlaw of martial arts in a way, because he was very much against gis and dojos and belts and that, because he said a lot of it was a hustle. So that gave me an eye for certain kinds of martial artists. And plus, like I said, my affinity to the streets. When I got into martial arts, I had an affinity to martial artists who had a way of dealing with the streets.
Where the hell you going?
I ain't going
anywhere. You think you going?
A martial artists who were street guys who were also martial artists. So if you look at a lot of my work, those are the type of brothers that I highlight, because that's what I like and what I'm into. And that's why you don't see a lot of gis and belts and traditional type martial arts in my work, because that's not really what I'm into. Nothing is wrong with it, but that's just not what I'm into. But that's what opened it up. It was just a chain of events of, you speaking to men that are respected by other men. That gives you some respect. And that gives you people at least willing to give you an opportunity, or some of them even want to sit in front, of their camera.
And of course, you eventually end up with, I think, probably one of the most grueling and demanding martial artists, New York martial artists and grandmasters I've ever seen, and that's Yehuda Shem Yehuda, the chief professor, the man known as the chief professor. Talk a little bit about, you know, your training under him. Talk a little bit about his contribution to your documentary.
He was so far. He's like him and Professor Rahman. Just meeting them helped me to understand the title of professor and what that is. See, a true professor of martial arts can do just that. He can profess it. You can put him in front of a university setting full of students sitting in chairs, and he can teach martial arts without doing anything. Because his understanding of it is so vast and so complete. Not everybody can do that. Some people, you know, their martial art, it doesn't extend outside of themselves, meaning that they're excellent at what they do as far as combat. But when it comes to transferring the information, that's just not what they do. There's an old legend that of all of the grandmasters that Dr. Powell made, that they each have a strength, almost like in a comic book. I asked the chief professor one time, what would be your strength if that would be the case? What would be yours? And he thought, and he said, teaching. You know, my strength, my superpower is teaching. That's what you miss in contributions. That's his greatest contributions, because when it comes to martial arts, if you can't teach me or pass it on, you have no value to me unless you and I are in a dark alley together somewhere, and your abilities is able to help save me. But other than that, what you know can't benefit me unless you can teach me what you know. And part of the reason why he is the teacher is because he approached it that way. Like I said, that was his determination. This is what I'm going to do with my life. So like a person would decide they wanted to be an electrician or a carpenter, you can't play with that, because a person might ask you to build their home. A person might ask you to wire their home. There can't be no holes in your skill if you're an electrician or if you make bridges. Or the same thing, when a man decides that he's going to be a teacher of martial arts, whatever art it is you're teaching, you got to know it inside out. That's what differentiates him from everybody. It wasn't part-time. It wasn't when he got time. He made time to become who he is, and that is his value.
All right, we're getting ready to wind down this last hour here. What is the status of the documentary, and what are your plans after the release of this documentary? What are you working on now? Tell the people what's going on with you now.
The status of documentaries is done. And my goal, my desire is to just have showings. Whatever size screen you have, I just want to go around, show this documentary. I would like to move around with the documentary Chitlin Circuit style. That's my desire, because I don't want to put it somewhere where only certain people can get their hands on it. I want to move around with it, expose people to them, because of going back to the beginning, the guns and the drugs and the crack, the young people have gotten away from martial arts. So all of these brothers that are in my documentary, as far as New York, they don't live on an island somewhere. They don't live up in the mountains. They're not in Tibet. They're right in our neighborhoods. People don't even know who they are. They're older men that have a knowledge that the younger ones need, that everyone needs. But because we feel like we're doing other things, we're not noticing them, they're not noticing us. So I want to kind of introduce them to our community, because they don't know. They don't know that they've been through what they've been through, and that they know what they know, and that you have Black men who have, over a period of 30 or 40 years, have refined an art where we've come up with our own thing that is not beholden to Japanese, Asian, or anybody else. That it's a homegrown art based off sound martial principles. That's right here. So that's my goal, is to introduce these men to our communities. And I coined a phrase to create an attractive bridge, because there is a gap between the younger and the older. You have to make a bridge, but the bridge has to be attractive, and the attracting power of the bridge can be martial arts, because that is something that the young ones are, whether they realize it or not. That's our nature, to know, to have that type of confidence, to have that kind of command and mastery over yourself, where you can walk with confidence. So when you see somebody that can give you that, that's not trying to hustle you, that's not trying to turn you into somebody else, and not trying to use you to pay off a partner, but to teach you because they feel like you need. That's how I find my teachers. Yeah, I don't look for teachers where we have a business arrangement, where I'm paying you to teach me things that's going to save my life. I think that interferes with the transference. I'm not saying you shouldn't make any money, but that's not how I like to learn. Strange enough, this is why I so readily sit down with you, Tony, is because I began to realize that nobody's done what I've done as far as interviewing 40 Black martial artists, not just in New York, but anywhere.
Nobody that I know of.
And that's put me in a very unique position as way of the perch that I've been sitting on. There are things that I've seen that only I can say. And I also believe that my being outside of that martial circle has allowed me to see certain things.
Question.
Sure.
The evolution of Alex Shaw. What are some of the most profound lessons you've learned on this journey?
Fighting, and having that the desire, the will, the same will that'll make a man do 1,000 push-ups and throw 1,000 kicks and practice 1,000 hours. That needs to be brought into anything that will preserve life. So whether it's the foods we eat, or the relationships that we have, whether it's the building, maintaining, and developing strength, which is like Professor Gatling, just to be on the lookout for those things that engine their life and not death. Just like everything else, the plant grows towards light. We have to be like that. So that's the main thing that I've noticed. And also that, in European education, everything is compartmentalized. So you could be the world's best surgeon, but the world's worst husband. Or you can be the world's greatest architect and also the world's greatest liar. So I look at martial arts as just an aspect of life. It's not my religion. It's just part of life. It's like when you go to school and you learn how to add, subtract, multiply, divide. You learn your ABCs and words and how to write a sentence. Most of us at a certain point, we never revisit a math class or a language class, but we use math and language every day for the rest of our lives. That's how martial arts should be. Well, not for everybody. Some of you want to take it further, you take it further. It's like some people take mathematics further, and some people take English further, where they become professors or novelists or what have you. But the average person, you get the basis of the arts, and you walk around with that, because really it's simple. Everybody, it's become such a money-making thing.
As we get ready to close out this interview, we've had some things that have happened here recently. We had an election that just passed, and we've had some reverberations from that election. I know personally you are a husband and a father, an entrepreneur and a documentarian and a historian and a million other things. What do you see as far as politics for our community? How do we use martial arts if there's such a strategy? What is the strategic value of martial arts as it relates to the politics of the Black community?
Okay, that kind of leads and draws back to what we were just talking about. We have to stop seeing it as just that. So the only way martial arts can benefit us outside of providing a form of defense is if we use martial concepts in the way that we move, whether it's politics, whether it's family. We allow things to happen, and then we think about it. That's what freezing is. When a person tells you that they froze, the reason you're freezing is that you've been confronted with something that you've never thought about, and it's dire. And since you've never thought about it, you don't have the data to even begin to know how to deal with the situation. And that doesn't just have to be somebody standing in front of you trying to take your wallet. That's just life. So I think martial concepts need to be infused, because remember, they vowed never to teach us the science of warfare. The science of warfare is not just going to war, because, as I think it was Fred Hampton said, politics is war without bloodshed. War is politics with bloodshed. So that means that you're still functioning. It's like a thermometer. The cold side and the hot side are not separated. It's part of the same thing. They're just two extremes of the same thing. And like I said, we're taught how to compartmentalize information. We're not taught to look at it, as they would say, holistically. So once we begin to look at it holistically, we'll see that martial arts is everything. It's not just the day that you put on your gi and you walk into a dojo and you're doing your forms, or you're in your tournament, or somebody's bothering you, you have to take care of it. It's just how you think.
Indeed, indeed. As we close out, I want to show you this clip. This clip is of a Black martial artist in Detroit. I don't know if you're familiar with him. And I want to show you this this clip here, and then get your answer to the question of, do you believe that it should be mandatory for young Black men, young Black kids, young Black boys especially, to learn martial arts? But I'm going to show you this clip, and we'll get back to that question in just a minute. So just give me a minute, and I'm going to share that with you.
Sure.
Come on, attack. Gotta get open. Engage. If you don't, the enemy comes again. He has no mercy. Get up. You gotta get over and attack. There you go. Look at me. It's a fear. I gotta get it out of you, because now you're gonna always be angry at the wrong people. We're trying to help you. You're angry at us. We can't let you hold it. Good. Now relax. Take it. There you go. Get up. Come on. Attack. Come on. Good. Now do me. Come on. Come in strong. That's what I need. Strength. Good. Take it. Strong. Yeah. We know why you're angry, but you got to use that on the right people, not us. We love you. You got it. You got it. There you go. All right. Look at me. And I'm not gonna hurt you. I want you to respect what you're scared about. Not because you're scared. You got it?
Now that's something we don't see every day.
No, we don't.
Your thoughts Do you think it should be mandatory that young black boys learn martial arts?
No. I do think it should be mandatory that it's part of our culture. Meaning that if it's almost like, say, college, you have certain families, or whether it's the police force, you have certain families, it's part of their culture and conversation that you go to school, you go to college. Some families is you go to school, you join the police force, you become a firefighter. Your grandfather's a firefighter. It's not mandatory, but you're around it. That's your atmosphere that you have. It's there for the decision. You still might not do it, but it's part of your everything. It's part of your growing up. Like I said, it's part of your atmosphere. So I think martial arts should be just like righteousness and things like that. It should just be part of our culture. And when it's part of our culture, those that are so inclined, at least it's there for them. Because you want people that are inclined towards it. And if it's part of the culture, everybody will know something. It's like bears. They don't go to a class to be bears, but it just in the course of being a young cub or growing up a bear, you know how to hunt, and you know how to use your claws, and you know how to be a bear. Tigers, everything. So I think that with us, again, it's compartmentalized. We get up, we go somewhere to learn how to fight. We get up, we go somewhere to learn how to wrestle. We go somewhere to learn discipline, as opposed to just, and I know it's like, a far-fetched thing, but I find that's what works when it's there. So even with martial arts, I've said that I believe that the mistake that a lot of our martial artists, the mistake that they have made is that it's one size fit all. Meaning that a person does make it to your dojo or your gym, you put the gi on, you put the patch on, you give them a white belt, but who said that's what they wanted to do? They may just want to have a grasp of combat. They may be getting bullied at school. They knock on your door, they want help dealing with this bully. You put the gi, the patch, the belt on them and tell them that, in 5 years you'll go up and you may be a black belt, but they don't have belt problems. They don't have a white belt problem. They have a Monday morning problem. So I think that what we should do is have self-defense classes. So let's say, like I'm looking at the picture you have there with Ronald Duncan. If you have one of Ronald Duncan's students teaching a self-defense class, he's not teaching you ninjutsu, he's teaching you self-defense. But the whole time he's teaching, he's telling you about Ronald Duncan. He's telling you about ninjutsu. He's telling you about the heritage and the lineage of ninjutsu. And guess what? Out of that group of 25 people, you may have 5 that want to learn what Ronald Duncan taught. That's where you'll get your best students.
Yeah, I can't get him up here. I can't get him up here, Alex. I can't get him up here.
Who? Oh, Khalid.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, well, we've come to the end. We're coming up on 3 hours. I want to thank you, Alex, for coming on and sharing your wisdom with us. This is going up on my new social media outlet on Substack, by the way. All right. Until next time, we remind you to be good to others, but don't forget to be good to yourself. And remember, the answers are there. You just have to ask the question. So until next time, this is Mr. Tony Maceo saying we are gone.
All right, Tony.
All right.